Tropical storm warnings are in play. They're going to continue at least through the afternoon. Wouldn't be surprised if some of those warnings get dropped even before the end of the day today, likely by the dinner hour onwards, as we will see some improvement for Corpus Christi's forecast. Up to 3 feet in that storm surge as far as peak goes, and we're already seeing some of that begin right now. 2.2-foot storm surge in Nueces Bay out towards USS Lexington, 1.8 feet. Now you have that really strong onshore push of wind, and these winds are, pretty sustained at say about 40 miles per hour, 30 to 40 miles per hour. But you have those wind gusts right now are really kind of pushing quite strongly. Corpus Christi 48-mile-per-hour gusts. You have that buoy just offshore, a sustained northeast or southeasterly wind. That easterly wind shows you that we have that twist and that rotation inside that storm. But it's really not that surprising that we're seeing the strongest of the winds up towards Corpus Christi. You think of tropical systems and you always break it down into a quadrant. So you go like this, and it's in the northeastern quadrant that you see those stronger winds, the wraparound of that storm. And so it is going to be Corpus Christi further inland that's going to see the gustiest of those winds. A bit further down towards Brownsville, we're kind of clearing things up. No concern with that offshore push of wind on the south side of Herald. But Corpus Christi Naval Air Station took a wind gust of 63 miles per hour, the strongest of the day thus far. Corpus Christi International Airport, 62-mile-per-hour gusts there, and out towards Rockport, 53-mile-per-hour gusts. Not getting a lot of word on power outages. I'm sure there are a few scattered about here and there, but it's really been the combination of wind and rain that has made it a difficult morning and getting into the afternoon to get by. I mean, it's the wind-driven rain. It stings as you're standing outside, and it has prompted some flood warnings as we track those into the afternoon. In a more immediate threat, we have tornado warnings on the board.
Wishing, outside, of course, of any flash flooding or big impacts, any severe weather, that more of this rain was situated a little bit farther off to the north, because you see in San Antonio, they're at a rain deficit for the year so far of more than half a foot. And it leaves you with these top two categories of drought, the reds indicating extreme and exceptional drought in the hill country of Texas right here. Pockets of extreme drought across Dallas-Fort Worth. Worse, though, from Killeen down to the San Antonio area. Houston is also in extreme drought. They got a little bit of rain today. Then we can overlay where we've had all this heavy rain related to Herald. So for places like Corpus, down to Brownsville, where you got these corridors of rain that set up, that orange representing 3 to 5 inches of rain as estimated by Doppler radar. It's exactly what the doctor ordered for the drought. It just came along clearly with some hazards, particularly in places like Corpus Christi with those big wind gusts, the flash flood warning that's up, and also some of the coastal surge. We recorded a water rise across parts of that bay up to about 2.5 feet above normally dry ground. So this hasn't come without a cost, but folks clearly across South Texas, we're looking for some rain by any means necessary, and boy, are they getting it out of Tropical Storm Harold. Look at Corpus Christi. That number is more or less equivalent to what we showed you for the rain deficit of the year so far, and it's the amount of rain that they've recorded just in the past 24 hours, 4.29 inches. Farther off to the north, Port Aransas up over 2 inches. Port Isabel, just 0.4 of an inch. So you can see how sharp this gradient was between folks that got a lot of rain from this storm and then all of a sudden not so much quickly. Now, the worst of this continues to move over toward the Rio Grande, eventually into mountainous regions of Mexico. That's where the flash flood threat will be the most significant. Because of that terrain, you've got that moisture being forced up the slopes, squeezed out into heavy rain that rushes into the valleys. That's something we're concerned about moving forward through this evening and tonight.
This is why so many emergency responders are saying for people to stay inside.
That was Fox Weather's Jason Fraser earlier as Harold made landfall, the first U.S. landfall of the 2023 Atlantic Basin hurricane season. The area is at high risk for flash flooding, and the timing for the Lone Star State, that's when Fox Weather returns.
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From morning forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people.
That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
Welcome back to Fox Weather Now as we track Harold tearing through Texas. And look at that. This is video, courtesy of the National Weather Service office out of Houston, of, actual rain falling in Houston for the first time in 25 days. This is on the extreme outer fringes of Harold as some of that moisture moves on shore. But a lot of people rejoicing to see some of that rain. Houston is in extreme drought, and much of Texas has been in a worsening drought over the last several weeks, the last couple of months. So the rain is well received. It just comes along with some tropical hazards. Harold did make landfall this morning. It was the first landfall of the 2023 Atlantic Basin hurricane season in the United States and happened on Padre Island in Texas with max winds around 50 miles per hour, maximum sustained winds. We did see some gusts in places like Corpus Christi in excess of 60 miles per hour. And this has been a storm that's been very impactful over the last several hours, the late morning through the early afternoon, with a lot of spin in these bands, numerous tornado warnings right now, thankfully, as I'm checking the Fox Weather Alert system, and substantial rain in a place that badly needs it as this continues to race off to the west toward the Rio Grande and eventually into Mexico. Now, I mentioned how well received the rain is. So is the brief cool down, even with tropical air moving overhead. Corpus Christi is 80 degrees right now. Yesterday, it was 100. Every day this month, except for 2, have been at least 100 degrees. And the 2 days that weren't, you had a high temperature of 99 degrees. So feeling 80-degree temperatures in the middle of an afternoon is actually very welcome. You've got some inland spots like Laredo seeing that heavy rain. The temperature right now just in the mid-70s. I did mention that water rise above normally dry ground. A storm surge, it's very impacted by the topography, the shape of the coastline, and the seabed below. In this pocket of the bay, as you had these strong wind gusts, 60 plus, that were perpendicular to the overall coastline here, there was a water rise. The forecast from the National Hurricane Center, a very good one, 1 to as much as 3 inches. Nueces Bay here, a water rise of about 2.5 feet. Tropical storm Harold making landfall this morning in South Texas, bringing torrential rain, strong winds as the storm continues to move off to the west. Fox Weather's exclusive storm tracker, Mark Sudduth, is in Corpus Christi. Mark, you were wanting to make the trip a little bit farther inland, but these bands have been especially healthy over the past few hours, and they've generated a lot of threats.
Absolutely. Yeah, it says something. These very heavy bands with the wind, and there's quite a few people out. It was a tropical storm, not a hurricane, so businesses weren't closed for the most part.
In Mexico, we saw Harold tighten on up and become a reasonable tropical storm, clearly based on what we've seen today with those wind gusts where you are, up over 60 miles per hour. What were your thoughts with this as it was moving on shore and you were looking at it on radar?
It was quite remarkable to see, and then reading that information that it was pretty ill-defined in those late hours of the game, so to speak, and then it really ramped up. You know, not too unusual that they tighten up before they hit the coast down here. We've seen that before, but, you know, when you go from a depression last night, didn't even have a name yesterday, and then it became Tropical Storm Harold overnight, really strengthening this morning, and then that perfect, well-defined center starting to really tighten up. Lucky that we didn't have another day or two over the water. Those very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico could have been a hugely different outcome here. And we saw that 6 years ago with Harvey, rapidly intensifying between the Yucatan and the Fulton Rockport area of Texas.
That is the key message right there. We saw what happened in those last few hours, but if instead of a few hours it was 48, we would have had some big-time problems with this system. But what a week it's been for you. Last several days, you were in California. You saw the impacts from Hilary. You made the drive over through many places farther off to your north that are in brutal drought, extreme and exceptional, with fire weather warnings up. And then you find your way to the Texas coastline and get hit with an intensifying tropical storm. What's that run been like over the last several days?
You know, Ian, I'll figure that out in the days to come as I process it all. Quite the remarkable several days from Friday to now. Just incredible to see what happened in the desert Southwest. Meeting people out there, talking with them about how they were perceiving the threat from Hilary, and then coming down here to, you know, you could call it hurricane country. There's a lot of places on the Gulf Coast, Florida, the East Coast that could claim that name. But it's true. They are used to this down here. Yet it is still impactful. It can be disruptive. And I think this one, though, the benefit here is going to be that rainfall. And since Harold is moving fast enough, it's not going to leave a legacy of flooding.
Mark, we know this was a very busy run. We thank you for all your hard work and bringing us these pictures right here on Fox Weather. Based on what we're seeing out in the Atlantic, we'll be talking a lot in the days and weeks to come. Mark Sudduth, thank you.
Yeah, always good to be here. Thank you, Ian.
Harold out west in Southern California, portions of Nevada still dealing with the muddy mess caused by Hilary.
Yeah, I mean, one's a Category 4 storm making landfall, is actually not so thankfully for Mexico, but for Southern California. But still, I mean, the impacts that were felt from Hilary were just incredible. We started in Cathedral City, which took an incredible hit from flooding waters, the mudslides, just incredible.
That's right behind you there, Jane. This is what everybody was talking about. It's a front-end loader. I was wondering, hey, what's up with this? And we're actually going to speak with the fire chief from Cathedral City. But then I considered these are places that you don't typically see tropical systems. I wonder if they have things like high water vehicles.
Tropical systems are even really just flooding rain.
Yes.
You know, in a typical California setup, this on the other side of the mountains, you don't see floodwaters like this, mudslides, landslides. Yeah, closer to the coastline into the valleys, but dozens of people had to be rescued this way, you know, using vehicles pretty atypical that you would see in water rescues.
Yeah, I think the fire chief described it as thinking outside the box. So they certainly had to do that, and they did a great job rescuing some elderly people out of their homes. Hilary's torrential rain also led to dangerous mudslides in SoCal. This from San Bernardino County, a massive mudslide unleashing as that water rolled downhill, all occurring behind a fire station. While the building was unharmed, thankfully, roads on either side were completely blocked off, and that wasn't limited just to where you're seeing here. That was the case, Jane, for a lot of places across the Coachella Valley. They were completely cut off, at least for a period of time.
And at one point in time, 911 operations had to go down because they weren't able to get everything up in order. So that is a scary thing. You imagine, a fire station blocked on either end. You need to get these emergency vehicles out of the way, and you're blocked in a lot of ways. Several inches of mud, too, in a lot of these cities as these mudslides and landslides came through.
That's why the front-end loaders came on out.
Well, flights still took off and landed during Hilary, although some passengers certainly had a terrifying experience. Listen to this. Well, an Alaska Airlines flight certainly had a rough landing at John Wayne Airport yesterday after the plane's landing gear failed. That's always my worst nightmare, if the landing gear doesn't come out as expected.
That's a reasonable fear, Jane. Yeah.
Right. Well, heavy rain, low visibility, plus winds, all contributing factors to the difficult landing. Now, thankfully, no passengers were harmed, but I can imagine a lot of white-knuckle grips there.
Yeah, everybody in the Fox Forecast Center digging into this a bit. Tough place for this to happen. John Wayne Airport is actually the shortest commercial airport in the entire country. It's only a little bit more than a mile long as compared to LAX, which is shortest runway is almost 2 miles.
I've been to the Newark Liberty Airport short runway, and that's no fun.
No deal. Long runways only for Jane.
That's it.
We're glad everybody was okay.
Absolutely.
Let's get to the extreme heat. Of course, with all the action in the tropics, a lot of which has actually been dictated by this powerful bubble of heat. We're sweating it out for a lot of folks through the hottest week of summer so far. Dallas, hottest week of summer so far. Dallas, you're up to a high of 104 today. Baton Rouge, 105. Denver, 94 degrees. And this is, again, dominating the overall weather pattern, pushing Hilary north, Harold off to the west, and keeping the rest of the mess, at least for now, away from the U.S.
It's hard for me to imagine that we're talking about the hottest week of the summer, considering the heat that we had so far this year.
It's been such a big story for weeks and weeks and weeks.
And this time, now we're talking the Great Lakes and, portions of the heartland really getting in on the dangerous heat. It's really been Texas, the Southwest, that has felt the brutal grip of this high pressure. But now you've got, by Thursday, 173 million with temperatures above 90 degrees. That's excessive heat warnings.
Just for heat alerts from New Orleans up to Minneapolis, they include about 100 million people. You can see all the pink, which is the most dangerous, excessive heat warnings. The problem with the timestamp is those run through Friday evening.
I noticed that, right? We're sitting here Tuesday afternoon, and this runs through the end of the week.
It's brutal. And the extended nature of heat like this is where the danger comes in, particularly when you're in August, which features strong record high temperatures, Jane. We could break
200 plus.
It's a lot.
Listen, I think this is going to go down as the summer of record-breaking heat. It's already been so, but to see the numbers fall this week has certainly been incredible. Just to put some, digits to the board, 96 in Chicago, but that heat index in the triple digits is going to make back to school, too, have to deal with this.
Hang in there, be safe, take breaks, stay hydrated as we move on through this very rough week of heat. It's all eyes on the Gulf Coast, though, as Tropical Storm Harold churns inland. What a difference 12 hours makes. You have Corpus Christi yesterday on the left and Corpus Christi today on the right, the area that was likely hit the hardest by this tropical system. The areas in Texas on high alert as flash flooding and strong winds batter the region. We're tracking it all when Fox Weather Now comes right back. Good Tuesday afternoon. Welcome back to Fox Weather here at the bottom of the hour. I'm Ian Oliver, and this is Fox Weather Now. We've been watching throughout the day today Harold, a tropical storm that made a landfall this morning, the first United States landfall of the 2023 Atlantic Basin hurricane season, and it has been generating some issues across South Texas, as well as some very beneficial, much-needed rain across the southern part of the Lone Star State. Our focus also on Franklin in the Caribbean, a poorly defined system, but one that could bring dangerous flash flooding to places like the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So that's a look at Corpus Christi, a spot that got some of the worst of this. Still a band of rain working through that area that previously had some rain rates up in excess of 4 inches per hour that center, what's left of it, approaching the Rio Grande now. But you could see some of the scenes from Corpus Christi where there was a water rise across parts of that bay up to about 2.5 feet and some recorded wind gusts up over 60 miles per hour. Let's get out to Fox Weather hurricane specialist Brian Norcross. Brian, Harold making the most of its last moments over its energy source, the Gulf of Mexico, and it has brought a punch of some wind, some beneficial rain. Folks in Houston, this much rain, but everybody in South Texas outside of these hazards has been so glad just to see a little bit of moisture.
Yeah, then the lesson here is let's pay attention to the forecast from the National Hurricane Center because they really did peg it right. Yesterday, we were looking at a very sloppy system that barely qualified to be a tropical depression, but it had this opportunity over the very warm Gulf, and it took advantage of it even a little more than I expected here. And, you know, Ian, you mentioned the report from the Houston National Weather Service office. Look at the satellite here, and the Houston National Weather Service's office is down there on I-45 on the way to Galveston, about halfway from Houston down to Galveston. So it's south of the city. But, boy, it's really hard to find some kind of shower, at least in the last 6 hours, that might have somehow dumped almost 2 inches of rain. Is that what they reported there? I mean, it's crazy. Did I read that right?
Yeah, we only saw the video, which represented a pretty big downpour. I'll pull up the numbers now, see how much they recorded. Corpus, though, is up over 4 inches. Their entire rain deficit for the year erased by this in 24 hours.
Yeah, well, Corpus, I'm not really totally surprised because Corpus was in the main band, right? But Houston, you can see here, I mean, it's almost like passing clouds there. And I was saying that Houston might get a sprinkle. But anyway, I was very surprised by that. It just shows you there's so much moisture and heat over the Gulf of Mexico that you can get when you have the energy. You can get outer bands that are surprising. But anyway, here's where we are right now with this system. You can make out the rotation right in there. When we have the computer analyze it, we get it right there, right at Laredo, and the pinks are where the strongest winds are. So that's moving in the general Laredo area now, but I'm going to move through really quickly. But still, the band, the way the geometry of this is, the band is over Corpus Christi, and so there's still the possibility of even more rain. There you see it. Look on the radar there, that band right in there. That's the strong band. So embedded in that are good downpours, as we saw just a little while ago. Now, why did the track do this funny thing here? It didn't actually track like that. It tracked along this way, and then this center dissipated, and then it tracked along this way. A new one formed up under the thunderstorm. So the lesson here is that in order to intensify, you have to have the center under the thunderstorms so that the air comes rushing in and then up in the thunderstorms. You have to have that whole motion going on. And so when it did that right offshore, bang, it ended up being a pretty healthy tropical storm with wind gusts over 60 miles an hour. Now where we are is we still have, look, there's still offshore here. We still have lightning showing up offshore there. So it's still going to be a healthy band here. Whether it goes right over Corpus or not, that's another question. Here we have the moisture in the atmosphere. Look at it there where the dark greens are. And you can see the moisture is letting up back here, but that doesn't mean there's no thunderstorms in those convergence bands. Now, watch as we go through time. So here we are this afternoon, about 4 o'clock Central Time, and watch as we go for the next few days, and it goes speeding across the northern part of Mexico. The moisture goes through El Paso. They're going to get rain, and then into the desert Southwest, and a pretty healthy rain chance coming up there in all those areas that generally don't get rain this time of the year. And when they get a monsoon, it's usually from the other direction, Pacific moisture coming in. But the Gulf moisture is much richer generally and much more tropical, because that water temperature in the Gulf is up over 90 degrees in some spots. So here's the corridor of rain, and you see it going from where the storm is now on up into the desert there. And you can't help but notice this area in here where you have high rain amounts up at least in the 3 to 5 inch range. Hurricane Center saying some spots there in the 10-inch range. Those are mountains in Mexico that are just across the Rio Grande River. And so that will enhance the rain. So another lesson with this is the mountains enhance the rain. That's going to be an issue with Franklin as well. So this is going to move on out, and this is through Thursday, all this rain moves up into the desert and actually spreads up into the west. So more rain coming. Okay, now let's look at Franklin down here. So here, this is kind of a messy, weird situation, because what we have is this very broad center, extremely broad center down here, and it's, you know, it's barely a tropical storm in terms of its structure, but it has these huge thunderstorms over here on the right side of the system, and the thunderstorms have plenty of wind in it to be a tropical storm. So it's going to be interesting when the Hurricane Center comes out with their forecast here in just a moment. There's the cone. So the idea is that maybe it intensifies a little bit if it can pull the structure together. Again, if the thunderstorms can get over top of the center, then it has a chance to intensify a little, but doesn't have a lot of time before it gets to the Dominican Republic tomorrow morning. And then passing over those big mountains, it weakens some, and then has a chance, as it meanders north of Puerto Rico, to intensify into a hurricane. The indications are that it will move to the north. They're the spaghetti models, and they're a little more unified today than they were yesterday. Surprising, considering this very disorganized situation. But you do see some models kind of meandering over to Haiti. The core of them indeed goes up over the Dominican Republic, and that's where the consensus, which is generally the best model. If you're looking online, you want to look for the TVCA or TVCN. That's the best one. That's the average of the best models. That's what the Hurricane Center generally uses, one of the consensus models, to make their cone. Now, when we look at the big effects from this, we don't think it's going to be the wind. We think it's going to be the rain over the Dominican Republic. And you can see that the Fox model has very heavy rain over the eastern part here, but if the storm were to track farther this way, then the heavier rain might be over here. The bottom line is the whole country really subject to extreme rainfall and possible flooding. Now, the pattern that's driving this thing is a dip in the jet stream off the East Coast. We currently have that over Kansas City, over the U.S. It's that huge heat dome, of course, and it's just sitting out there. And we have a dip off the East Coast. So that can't grab the system yet because it's too far down in the Caribbean. But going ahead in time, it looks like eventually when the system gets north of Puerto Rico, it can grab it and pull it north. So bottom line is it's Bermuda that will have to watch it eventually, but that's going to be into next week. So this will be with us for a while. Ian?
Brian, it sounds like we're just getting that new update in from the National Hurricane Center. I'm seeing the Fox Weather Alert System flashing. Looks like we have tropical depression, Harold, and that's not a surprise, as this has been on land now for what, about 5 hours?
Right, exactly. So definitely a tropical depression, and let me see, yes, tropical depression, Harold, and the one I'm really interested in to see what their analysis is for Franklin.
Yes.
I'm virtually certain they're going to keep it a tropical storm. There are some west winds. Actually, the winds that are missing are in the northwest quadrant. but I think there's enough of a circulation they'll keep it a tropical storm. It's a messy tropical storm, and the question will be the forecast in the short term, whether they still think it can pull itself together as it moves toward the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, all the scattered showers you can see on the northeastern periphery of Harold. I didn't want to leave you hanging, Brian. We get some weather investigators and myself and Dylan here for the showers in Houston. To your point, Houston Hobby, Bush Intercontinental Airport, both bagels today. It was at the National Weather Service office, which is in Dickinson, Texas, south of Houston, east of Interstate 45, just west of the Bay. They got a grand total of 14/100ths of an inch. But it was significant because it was the first.
Oh, 14/100ths. Okay,
yeah.
I had somehow I thought there was some big number. Okay, well that makes a little more sense then. But yes, but they're south of town, so they kind of cheating just a little bit, but good for them.
Yeah, a little downpour that came through. They were all happy to see it. Maybe it cooled things down for 30 seconds or so. So we got Tropical Depression Harold. We're standing by. Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Brian Norcross. We'll check back in with you when we get a little bit more insight into what's happening with Franklin, farther off to the east. And as Brian mentioned, that analysis will be open to interpretation a little bit from the National Hurricane Center. So here we are with Tropical Depression Harold. Depression because those winds have dropped down below the tropical storm threshold, down to 35 miles per hour. Its motion is still consistent at 21 miles per hour. Pressure has come up a touch, too, now at 999 millibars. So where this center is, somewhere in there, finding its way awfully close to the Laredo and the Rio Grande. And you can see with our high-resolution mapping here, all the terrain, the topography here, the mountainous regions in Mexico that will really work to squeeze all that tropical moisture out of this system as the air gets forced up those slopes. And because of that, we've got several inches of rain that we're expecting in these areas, and that's going to lead to a dangerous flash flood threat through what's left of this afternoon, the evening, and into the overnight. We mentioned Harold. We've got Franklin. We do want to get you updated with what's happening elsewhere in the Atlantic Basin as we're keeping an eye on the National Hurricane Center to get you that update on Franklin as soon as we get it. You've got Disturbance 2, which is actually what's left over from what was once Tropical Storm Emily. You've got Gert. That's not even highlighted here because it's a total mess. It's completely gone. It's been this ribbon of wind shear that these back three systems, Invest 92L, what was Emily and what was Gert, got shredded by. They weren't able to make it into a more suitable or favorable environment. Now you've got what was Emily, disturbance number 2, with about a 30% chance of development, or that's down now to just 20% as it battles up against that ribbon of wind shear, an El Nino type setup over the main development region of the Atlantic. But there is some shot here as that gets north of that hostile zone that this could redevelop into a tropical system. About a 30% chance of that as we move on through the next week or so. So that's what we'll watch. Thankfully, if it does so, it's out over the open waters of the Atlantic, and it's not a problem. We'll also have to watch 92L. The chances of that developing have dipped a bit. At one point, it was looking like a lock to become Idalia, the next name on the list. No longer expecting that to be the case necessarily, but it does have a chance over the next several days. You look at how far through the season we have left to go. Yes, there's been this flurry of activity, 4 named storms in less than 40 hours that formed, which was a record. There's still 83% of activity for the tropical season remaining. So we've got a long ways to go as we move on. Care facility. That's when Fox Weather comes right back.
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From morning forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people.
That's why we love what we do.
Fox.
Welcome back to Fox Weather Now as we track Harold tearing through South Texas. This is a live picture from Corpus Christi, one of the areas that truly got the worst of this. In the bay there, on the high side, up to about 2.5 feet of water rise. You had wind gusts that exceeded 60 miles per hour and more than 4 inches of rain. The entire rain deficit that Corpus Christi had racked up through 2023 so far, deleted. So that has been the benefit of this much needed moisture in a place where the drought was worsening. So there you go. This is brand new information of northern Mexico, mountainous areas that will squeeze out a lot of what's left of this tropical moisture, generating heavy rain rates and water rushing into the valleys. That will represent a considerable flash flooding risk in Mexico moving forward of the Gulf of Mexico, and generated some big wind gusts as it moved ashore. And out west, Tropical Storm Hilary making a mess of California. In Cathedral City, firefighters had to think outside the box when it came to rescuing residents from a senior care facility. Yesterday, crews used a front loader to scoop these folks up and bring them to safety after roads were inundated and floodwater left a lot of mud around. Leading the operation was Cathedral City Fire Chief Michael Contreras, and he joins us now here on Fox Weather. Chief Contreras, I know this has been a busy and I'm sure stressful run for you. Thanks for being with us on Fox Weather. You and your crews rescued more than a dozen senior citizens using a bit of a unconventional method. I think some eyebrows raised when everybody saw this video of the folks riding in the front end loader. What was the decision? We mentioned that you had to think outside the box. This is a place where you don't typically deal with tropical moisture generating problems like this.
No, you're exactly right. You know, the amount of rain, you know, we had about a year's worth of rain in 24 hours, which complicated things. We usually don't get this type of rain this time of year. But yeah, what the pictures you're showing with the front end loader, we were running out of options just due to the dynamic safe. Can we do this safely? And I'm not aware in my 34 years of anything as far as putting bodies in there, right? That scoop is meant for dirt, not for bodies. And so, you know, when we came up with the plan, I brought all the company officer captains together and I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking, because we're running out of options. And I said, what are your thoughts? And we just talked it through of how can we make it as safe as possible for us, and probably more importantly for the residents. And you see some of them covered in sheets. We got them put on the protective devices. So we made it as safe as we could, and it was a team effort. It was all the men and women of the city and the heavy equipment operator and the owner of the equipment.
Yeah, a job well done to you and your team. This was a very unusual system and the impacts that it generated across your portion of California. We know the cleanup, the recovery will be days and weeks, but I know all those folks very appreciative of your efforts. Cathedral City Fire Chief Michael Contreras, thanks for telling us about it here on Fox Weather. All right, keeping it right there in Cathedral City, cleanup efforts clearly are underway following Hilary's destruction. That's where we find Fox Weather's Nicole Valdez joining us live. And Nicole, what a story that was, using a front-end loader to rescue those senior citizens. But this is what was required. It was what was necessary after the mess that Hilary made.
Yeah, probably the only kind of machinery that would have been able to trek through just how thick the sludge is out here in Cathedral City. And now those front loaders are being used for a much different effort. As you notice here, they're trying to make a dent as they pull away with entire barrels of dirt and sludge and mud that has just plagued this community here. It's one of the reasons why we know dozens of families are still trapped in their own homes, hoping, praying that these crews can make a dent on the situation so they can start to get out. And thankfully, it's not just the guys with the big machines here. I mean, take a look at the distance. The cars that were once, you know, just caked in several inches, if not maybe a foot of mud, are kind of having progress made thanks to the help of their own neighbors, getting anything like a shovel to try to dig out those cars, get people to be able to walk out of their homes, get some resources, get some supplies. It's it's really such an interesting situation here, something that neighbors tell me they have never seen before, even after other flood or rain events. The mud aspect of it is absolutely a brand new situation, and one that is truly really become quite the challenge here. It's part of the reason why Palm Springs School District, they've decided to keep schools closed for the next 2 days, recognizing that roads like this are still impassable and will likely be for some time, because the work that they're doing here does not happen quickly. This sludge is so thick and it is very difficult to navigate through. Sadly, Ian, what we have seen are people really trying to brave that trek, pulling their jeans up, taking their shoes off, and sort of trying to walk through it as best they can to either get to their neighbors, get to their homes, to maybe grab some things, get to their businesses. I mean, it truly is an incredible situation, an extraordinary visual here of just how dense this mud is after, again, that record-breaking amount of rain from then Tropical Storm Hilary.
Wow, Nicole, yeah, we could see it right behind you, that front-end loader grabbing a bunch of mud right now and just showing the size of this task. A huge cleanup there in California. Fox Weather correspondent Nicole Valdez, thank you. And we do want to get back to our top story. Now, tropical depression Harold continues to lash parts of South Texas. Fox Weather meteorologist Jason Fraser was on Padre Island when the storm made landfall. Take a listen.
Well, when this storm originally made landfall, we saw the winds gusting between 50 to about 55 miles per hour. Visibility was a huge issue here on Padre Island. Now, one of the other things to note here is that the winds were not only an issue, but also the rain. We saw the rain really at one point moving sideways. It was so hard to stand outside, and that was part of the reasons why some area school districts had closed the area. Now, city officials are concerned about some coastal flooding here in not only Padre Island, but also over in Corpus Christi. That was the reason why they encouraged people to stay inside. Now, one other thing to note with these tropical systems is usually in front of them, the air is very soupy, and then the air temperature goes down, and then it goes back up. One of the things that we saw with Harold was that same thing. When I walked outside about 4 a.m. this morning, it was hot, it was humid, and then as those outer rain bands for Harold moved in, that is when we saw the air temperature decline here. But right now, as you can hear as well as see here, the winds are continuing to pummel the area, and city officials encouraging people to stay inside. We may end up even seeing the sunshine later on today. Reporting from Padre Island, Jason Fraser for Fox Weather.
And look at this now, terrifying moments caught on camera overseas. This was a cable car left dangling in a remote part of Pakistan. The car is suspended hundreds of feet above the ravine that you can see. Army commandos were seen dangling from helicopters to help rescue the 7 children and 1 man who were stranded inside that cable car. Officials say strong winds made an already complicated rescue mission even more dangerous. After the 15-hour-long ordeal, everyone successfully removed from the cable car. So a great result, good work there in what was an especially challenging situation because of those big wind gusts. That's going to do it for this hour of Fox Weather Now. Don't forget, you can download the Fox Weather app to stay up to date with the latest forecasts. And of course, Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ. We'll get you updated on Harold and Franklin when we come right back.